I tried to use as much historically accurate videos and photography as I possibly could during this production. If anyone has original historic photos, please let me know. I've used stock photos from the internet to represent some of the scenes. Thank you very much.
Eugene Rogers arrived at what would become Sheridan in 1854 or 55. He was born in Norwich, Connecticut. Rogers saw an opportunity at what was the crossroads to Sacramento, Marysville, Grass Valley, Coon Creek, and Nicholas. The town of Lincoln was yet to be settled. Rogers built a home in what was known as the Shed, a 40 by 40 building. Rogers' shed was large enough for freight wagons and stagecoaches to stop. It became a very successful business. 2 stagecoaches and an average of 50 wagons stopped daily. The shed provided food and drink for animals and passengers. Farmers were happy to be able to sell grain and feed and purchase supplies. One of the earliest ranches in the area was owned by Theodore Sicard, a French immigrant. Sicard applied for a Mexican land grant and received 12,000 acres on the South Bear River near Johnson Ranch Crossing in 1842. He started an orchard of peaches and almonds. He would eventually sell property to Claude Channa, who I mentioned in the previous chapter. The discovery of gold in 1848 brought a flood of people to California. In 1849, California sought statehood, and after a heated debate in Congress arising out of the slavery issue, California entered the Union as a free non-slave state by the Compromise of 1850. It became the 31st state, September 9, 1850. The Shed became very popular. 2 evenings a week, dances were held. People from as far away as Auburn, Grass Valley, Marysville, and Sacramento attended. A racetrack was built. It became a prime destination in Placer County. One of the things I found unique was in 1860, a 40-foot tower was built with a telescope on top, so ranchers could keep track of their cattle grazing in the surrounding hills. In 1861, the Civil War began. Rogers was pro-Union. He renamed Rogers Shed to Union Shed, and as a tribute to General Philip Sheridan, named the town Sheridan. The railroad arrived in Lincoln in 1861. Some of Sheridan's population left for opportunities there. Not until the Civil War was winding down in 1866 did money become available and the railroad complete to Sheridan. There was less freight to be hauled by wagons. The shed became less and less necessary. Rogers built his own train depot, fearing the tracks were extended to Wheatland and Marysville, that Sheridan would be bypassed. In the winter of 1861 and 62, California, Oregon, and Nevada suffered the worst flooding in recorded history. A Pineapple Express, a warm rain that fell on a large snowpack, caused rapid melt. Some parts of the Sacramento Valley were covered in 30 feet of water. The floodwaters did not recede until midsummer. Leland Stanford, the newly elected governor, rode a boat through the streets of Sacramento to the state capitol for his inauguration. The legislature moved the government to San Francisco for months until the flooding subsided. Claude Channa and Theodore Sicard, whose homes and orchards were on the south side of Bear River, lost almost everything. Sheridan has been ravaged by several fires. In 1868, the Union Shed, the train depot, and a few other businesses were destroyed. The streets had just been laid out in blocks. A new train depot, a post office, were quickly rebuilt further north. The first post office was established July 10, 1868. Young Doherty served as Sheridan's first postmaster. Farmers still needed a place to buy and sell their crops. John Ziegenberg built the first general store in 1869. The town began to prosper as several businesses were established. In 1870, Mr. Blackburn built a substantial flour mill. The town had a bar, the Bedrock Saloon, and Peter Finch owned the blacksmith shop. The Royal Order of Good Templars were established. Never a good thing when a temperate society comes to town. The International Oddfellows organization had a lodge. Eugene Rogers was acting as railroad land agent. Flooding along the Bear River occurred often. In February 1872, reports were spreading of a monster in Yankee Slough. Men carrying pitchforks went to investigate. The monster turned out to be a 7.5-foot, 125-pound sturgeon.
In 1874, a new, larger train depot was built and a dance held to celebrate. The next year, a fire destroyed the old depot that Rogers had built and 30 cords of firewood. In spite of setbacks, Sheridan was growing. The mill was now owned by Daniel Click. It was powered by a 60-horsepower steam engine and produced 100 barrels of quality flour a day. Click was financed by Mark Hopkins, who was one of the big four investors that built the Transcontinental Railroad. A 2-story Sheridan Hotel was built and soon renamed the Parrot Hotel. It opened with a ball. There was a Wells Fargo office. O.K. Hopkins, brother of Mark, was a railroad ticket agent and telegraph operator. In 1876, a second hotel was built, the Centennial, for the 100th anniversary of the United States. Mr. Grubbs owned the livery stable. Things were looking up for Sheridan. In 1878, an article appeared in the Placer Herald saying, "Sheridan, we believe, is today the most prosperous town in Placer County." Sheridan and Wheatland have always had a love-hate relationship. It can be summed up with a letter to the editor in the Placer Herald. "We don't want no bridge to Wheatland." The writer inferred that if a bridge were built, Wheatland slickers would be coming to Sheridan. The town voted against contributing even $5 for bridge construction. The bridge was completed December 1877, paid for by Yuba and Sutter counties. There were often disagreements over levees and roadways between Sheridan and Wheatland. Some problems were caused because Wheatland is in Yuba County and Sheridan Placer. Many people worked in Wheatland during harvest season. Some businesses were in both towns. John Zimmerberg, for example, had stores in Lincoln, Sheridan, and Wheatland. Charles Lincoln Wilson hired Charles Holland to lay out the streets for all three towns, Lincoln, Sheridan, and Wheatland. On August 25, 1892, Sheridan was ravaged by its worst fire. A kerosene lamp exploded in the Parrot Hotel at 10 p.m. Mrs. Martin, the hotel manager, screamed a warning to customers there was a fire. Many had to jump from the second floor. The blaze spread rapidly. The Parrot Hotel was in the corner of 13th and G, a strong wind carried embers north across the street, igniting the block. Soon, the whole downtown was ablaze. The Parrot Hotel, the Palisar Hotel, the post office, Bashfield's store, the drugstore, a shoe store, a variety store, Big store, Curtis Saloon, Young Saloon, and several other businesses were lost. The train station, with its large wooden water tank crowning its peak, burned. Without a fire department, residents struggled to save their homes with buckets of water and burlap sacks. Sheridan never recovered. Afterwards, the business owners and residents left town. Remnants of the old foundations are all that still remain. The population of Sheridan continued declining in the 1890s. The mill closed in 1888. At its peak, the mill had employed 100 men. Dr. Bummel, the town's doctor, moved his practice to Lincoln. In 1892, the Temperance Society were banging the drums for prohibition. The saloon keeper got tired of living in a town of temperance cranks and sold out. The 1900s began with a much smaller Sheridan. The town folks watched the coming and going of the train. Mail showed up at 4. Eugene Rogers, now 77, retired as postmaster and took up sitting on a box in front of the post office with Bill Woodworth, who was known as Setting Bill. In 1911, Eugene Rogers, founder of Sheridan, died at 88. Rogers had owned several businesses and over 2,000 acres. Because of bad luck, his estate was only worth $748. His wife, Adeline Sandcliffe Rogers, passed away in 1928 at 81 after moving to Merced. Both are buried in the Sheridan Cemetery.